My father-in-law asked me to fix his shed, so I spent 2 weekends rebuilding it by hand. The next time I visited, he handed me a bill for the lumber and called me just a guest. My kids' photos were gone from the wall. My wife said it was time I learned my place. I'm 41 now. Been married to Melissa for nearly 14 years. We met in Houston. She worked admin at a logistics firm. I was doing custom cabinetry and contracting jobs. We hit it off fast. She was sharp, organized, the kind of woman who had her life planned out in a color-coded calendar. I like that. I came from a loud, messy home, lot of noise, lot of hard days. Melissa felt like calm, structure. Her family, though, from the jump, I knew I wasn't their kind. I was working class, the type they smiled at in public but never fully brought into the circle. Her dad, Charles, didn't hide it. First time I met him, he asked how long I planned to stay in manual labor before doing something serious. The man had a white-collar disdain he wore like cologne. Still, I tried. Because I loved Melissa. I showed up for every family thing. Fixed their sink when it backed up. Changed their floodlights. Helped her mom when she fell behind on tech stuff. I never asked for a dime. Not once. I just wanted them to see me as a man worth respecting. That respect never came. They called me handsy, like I was some sort of handyman always lingering around. Melissa would laugh it off. They just don't know how to say thank you, she'd say. You're doing more for them than their own sons. And that was true. Her brothers, both in finance, would show up and press shirts, eat, drink, and leave. Never lifted a finger. But when her dad's shed started collapsing, guess who he called? Didn't even ask. Just told me it needed to get done. You got the know-how, he said. Just need your hands and a weekend or two. He said he'd supply the lumber. That was it. So I gave up 2 weekends. Hauled my gear across town. Didn't get much help. Melissa and the kids would go inside while I worked. Her dad didn't come out, not even to check progress. I replaced the frame, rebuilt the roof, even used some of my own pressure-treated boards because what he bought wasn't going to hold up in Texas heat. By the time I finished, that shed looked like something out of a catalog. Square. Solid. Better than anything he'd had in 30 years. I left sore, sunburned, and stupidly proud, thinking maybe, this was the thing that would finally earn a nod. A handshake. Something. 3 weeks later, we went over for dinner. Same drill, Sunday pot roast, same rigid silence from the table. But when I walked in, something felt wrong. The wall in the living room, the one with all the family pictures, was different. Cleaner. Rearranged. And then I saw it. Our family photo, Me, Melissa, our 2 kids, was gone. Replaced by an older picture of just Melissa and her parents from some beach trip I'd never been part of. At first, I figured it was moved. Maybe being cleaned. But then Charles came in, handed me a manila envelope and said flatly, here's the receipt for the lumber. You used more than I expected. I laughed. Thought it was a joke. I told him I'd used about 40% of my own stock, better quality, too. He just stared at me. Doesn't matter. I didn't ask for upgrades. You're a guest in this house. Guests don't cost their hosts money. And just like that, I understood exactly where I stood in their world. A guest. Not family. Not a son-in-law. Not even the guy who fixed their shed. Just someone passing through. Someone beneath them. I looked at Melissa, expecting shock. Maybe a little anger on my behalf. She just said, Dad didn't mean anything by it. The picture wall isn't personal. It's just for our side of the family. You married me, not them. You have to stop trying so hard. It's time you learned your place. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I nodded, took the kids, and said we needed to get home early. That drive home was silent. My daughter asked why Grandpa didn't want our picture anymore. I didn't know what to say. Something cracked open inside me that night. Not rage. Not yet. Just cold, quiet clarity. They didn't see me. Not really. I was a pair of hands. A truck. A tool. But the thing about guys like me? We know how things work. And we know exactly how to make them fall apart. After that night, something changed in me. I stopped going to their Sunday dinners. Melissa still took the kids, said she didn't want to stir anything up. I didn't argue. I told her I had projects to finish, clients waiting. But truth was, I couldn't stand the thought of sitting at that table again, pretending to be part of a family that clearly wanted nothing to do with me. A week turned into 3, then 6. Melissa never pushed, but I could feel the shift. Less eye contact, more silence. When I'd ask how things went at her parents', she'd just say, "Fine," and go to the bedroom. The kids were confused too. My daughter stopped asking why Grandpa took the picture down. My son started calling her dad Pop like her brother's kids did. That one hit hard. Then came the receipts. They started showing up in the mail. First, it was the lumber invoice. Then a note from Charles itemizing what he claimed I used during the shed rebuild of screws, nails, stain. He even listed water and electricity. At the bottom was a total, $312.47. It wasn't about the money. It was the message. I built that thing with my own 2 hands, and he was charging me like I'd vandalized his property. I showed the letter to Melissa. She didn't even read it. Just sighed and said, "It's not worth the fight. Just pay him and let it go." Pay him? I laughed. You serious? She looked at me, deadpan. He's not going to drop it. And I don't want this turning into a family war. I told her if he wanted a war, he picked the right man to piss off. She walked away without a word. That week, I started getting frozen out in my own house. Melissa wasn't warm before, but now she was stone. We stopped sleeping together. She started texting late into the night. Once I caught a glimpse her brother's name, but it wasn't a group chat. It was just him. And I knew right then the stories being told about me behind my back. The picture wall, the invoice. Now this. They weren't just treating me like an outsider. They were pushing me out. Then Melissa brought up something I never expected. "I think we need to talk about selling the house." I blinked. "What?" "I've been thinking. Maybe we should downsize. Or move closer to Dad." Her dad? He lived in a gated community 40 minutes across town. I told her flat out, "I'm not moving closer to a man who bills me for nails and calls me a guest." She didn't argue. Just looked at me like I was a problem she was tired of solving. Later that week, I checked our finances. She had started moving money. Nothing big, but enough to notice. Transfers into a savings account I hadn't touched in years. Her name was on it too, but I hadn't seen it used in forever. I felt the walls closing in. They weren't just rejecting me. They were planning for a life without me. Melissa had already picked a side, and it wasn't mine. And that's when I decided. I was going to show them exactly what a guest can do when he stops being polite. A few days after the money transfers, I took a half day off work and sat in the truck outside our bank. I waited until I saw her walk out. She wasn't alone. Melissa was with her brother, Caleb. They weren't holding hands or anything, but they were close, leaning in, laughing. When Melissa got home that evening, I asked how her day was. "Busy," she said, without looking up from her phone. "See anyone interesting at the bank?" Her head snapped up. "What?" "I saw you with Caleb." She blinked. Just a flicker. "Yeah? So what?" I stared at her. "What were you transferring?" She set her phone down slow. "That's none of your business." That was it. No lie. No fake excuse. Just raw contempt. Something in me locked down. The next morning, I called in sick and pulled the last 2 years of bank records. She'd been slowly bleeding our joint account. Small transfers, timed around my paydays, spread across 3 different accounts I didn't even know she had access to. I followed the trail and found that one of them was tied to Charles's address. She was hiding money with her father. That wasn't all. The shed, the one I built? I looked up the permits, out of curiosity. What I found made my jaw clench. 2 months before I started that rebuild, Charles had filed for a tax deduction claiming a professional renovation on the outbuilding valued at $5,200. The photos he submitted? Mine. The build I did with my own tools, on my own time. He used my labor to cut his taxes, and he billed me for it. That night, I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Photos, emails, bank statements, copies of texts between Melissa and her brother, ones I pulled from our cloud backup. I wasn't looking for scandal. I was looking for proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That this wasn't just a cold marriage. It was a slow, calculated removal. 2 weeks later, I got my chance. Melissa left her laptop open. Her email was up. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. There it was. An email thread between her, Charles, and Caleb. Talking about next steps, dividing assets, when to push for separation. Charles even wrote, "Make sure he doesn't touch the retirement accounts. He's dumb enough to walk without a lawyer if you act sweet." That was when the anger finally settled in. They weren't just cutting me out. They were planning to strip me clean, turn me into the villain. Keep the house. Keep the kids. Use my own work against me. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Because you don't interrupt a thief while they're loading the truck. You wait, and then you take everything back, piece by piece. From that point on, I stopped reacting. I stopped arguing, questioning, asking. I gave Melissa exactly what she seemed to want, a husband who was quiet, passive, respectful. But behind the scenes, I was planning. I made copies of everything, paper and digital. I met with a lawyer, not the one we used for our mortgage, not anyone local. I found a guy downtown who handled high-conflict divorces, the kind where people play dirty and lie to the court. I brought in the emails, the transfers, the renovation documents. I showed him how they were funneling money, staging a story, and likely coaching the kids for custody. He looked over everything in silence. Then he said, "You need to play the long game. Document everything. Do not confront her. Not yet." So I did. Every time Melissa picked a fight, I stayed calm. I stopped sleeping in the bed. We had agreed on space, she told her parents. I played the role. The tired, emotionally distant husband. It's what they were counting on. The only time I lost it was when my son came home from Charles's one day and told me, "Pop says you only built the shed to look good for taxes." I asked him if that's what he believed. He shrugged. "Mom says you get mad over nothing." That night, I stood in the kitchen and stared at the woman I used to love, and I realized she was gone. Maybe she'd been gone for years. Maybe I'd been holding on to someone who stopped holding on to me a long time ago. Still, I waited. I let them believe they were winning. Then came the job offer. An old client called, said he had a 3-month gig up near Tulsa. Big payout, paid travel, quiet work. I told Melissa about it like it was just another job. She barely nodded, told me to do what I had to do. I left that Monday, but I didn't go to Tulsa. I stayed right here. Just rented a cheap apartment and started working quietly. Watching. Planning. I set up mail redirection. Updated my address with the court. I moved every legal and financial account I had out of joint access. I started preparing my custody case. I pulled every transaction, every email, every photo of the shed construction with timestamps and location data. Then, finally, I did the one thing they never expected. I filed for divorce. Not a warning. Not a discussion. Just the papers, delivered by courier, along with a formal demand for shared custody, property division, and a fraud complaint for misuse of joint assets. Melissa found out 2 hours later. Her first text wasn't, "Why?" It was, "You're going to ruin everything." That's when I knew she never loved me. She loved the version of me who kept quiet, fixed things, and stayed useful. Now that version was gone, and the reckoning was just beginning. Melissa tried to get ahead of it. She called me the next day, all fake tears, and "We can work this out." I didn't take the bait. I let my lawyer handle everything. Every email, every call, every attempted ambush. Her father sent a message through my son, asking me to be reasonable. That same week, I submitted the fraud complaint against Charles for misrepresenting my labor as paid work on his tax documents. I sent the photos, the invoices he gave me, and a signed affidavit from a contractor friend who inspected the shed and confirmed the materials and craftsmanship. The IRS opened a case. 2 weeks later, Charles's lawyer called mine. They wanted to settle privately. We said no. Meanwhile, the court reviewed our joint finances. Melissa's transfers, her secret accounts, everything came to light. The judge wasn't impressed, especially after my lawyer showed how she'd started funneling money while still living under the same roof, with no legal separation. That triggered a freeze on the accounts and a forensic audit. The look on her face when we met in court, cold, hard reality slamming down. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Because I was. The man she thought she could break down was gone. Custody? I got joint, with primary weekdays. The judge cited consistent emotional stability and household continuity. All documented thanks to the files I kept. The house. I kept it. Melissa cried in court, said she couldn't afford to live on her own without access to family support. The judge asked her why, with a full-time job and joint income, she had drained multiple accounts and hidden the money under her father's address. She had no answer. She moved in with Charles, the same man who now had an open file with the IRS and was being investigated for tax fraud. I didn't have to destroy him. He handed me the matches and asked me to light the fire. My kids? They saw it unfold slowly. I never badmouthed her, never spoke ill of Charles in front of them. I just kept being present, patient, solid. And they noticed. One night, a month after everything settled, My daughter brought out the old family photo, the one that had vanished from Charles's wall. She found it in a drawer at their place. "Can we hang this back up?" she asked. I nodded. We put it back up together. This time, on my wall. In my house. Melissa still tries to guilt me sometimes. Says I should have just let it go. That I broke the family apart. But here's the truth she'll never admit. They broke it the moment they decided I wasn't one of them. They underestimated a man who builds with his hands. Because they forgot we also know how to rebuild our lives. And this time, I built mine without them. Forever.